Good afternoon, hello and welcome. BTE Media's In Conversation series. Today, we welcome Michael Seaman, CEO and founder of Raccoon events and organisers of the award-winning National Running Show. Good afternoon, Michael.
Hey, mate, how are you doing?
I'm very well. And we were just discussing, and this is a bit of history for our viewers, that where you are sitting at the moment is where it all began.
Yeah, this is the old HQ of Raccoon events, which is basically a shed at the end of my garden.
Right.
Which now houses a treadmill,
yep.
And some cushions from the garden sofa.
There you go. So there's a lesson in that, isn't there? So, you know, from small acorns and ideas, things can obviously develop. Yeah. We are here to talk more about your recent announcement of the expansion of the running show into the US. But Michael, for our viewers, it'd be really great if you can just bring to life exactly how that event specifically, and I know you do others and we'll come and talk about that, came about.
Yeah, well, I'm a keen runner. I love running, and I've sort of took it up in sort of later life just as, you know, just something to do to stop me getting massively overweight with my horrendous drinking, which is what we all do in the exhibition industry. So I really love running, and I went to a big marathon expo, and there were loads of people. It was amazing. It was an incredible show, and big stands that looked amazing, and they were all sort of trying to sell me stuff for my race, which was the next day. Now, if you're running, you know that's actually the absolute worst time to try something new. Particularly if a marathon for most people is kind of like a really big goal. And yeah, to sort of try something new on the next day is actually sometimes quite dangerous and give you blisters, or you can have nutrition that can upset you. So I just kind of felt it was at the wrong time of year. And I had this whole concept of building a running show that was sort of community driven and happened at the start of the year. When people, it slingshots off the back of typical race seasons. So I thought I'd try and do it. And I had this idea. It was one of those pub ideas. So I think a lot of events people have got a pub idea. So you go, you're amazed, and you go, if I had my own business, this is the event I'd run.
You were working for obviously another organizer at the time, is that correct?
Yeah, I think I held on to the idea for about 7 years. And it was one of those ideas that just wouldn't go away. I mean, I've got hundreds, but this was one that would just never go away. And I remember I was in a car on the way back from a friend's house with my wife, and every time we had a long car journey, I'd bring this out, and she was like, "Well, you just do it." Is the polite version. And so I did, and so I left Clarion. I was working with Clarion at that point, and I left there, and I was doing some consultancy work on the side, and then I built the show. And it was just, it worked. It was everything that we said we would do, we did. And the first show did 12,500 visitors. It snowed on the day of the first show. I mean, I woke up, I was bricking it. Because you know, you wake up in the morning of your show, you go, well, snow, that's 10% off my attendance. And, you know, I was so invested in it because I'm passionate about the community. I love it. And I just didn't want it to fail. And I could have cried when I went to the front of that exhibition. There were 3,500 people in the queue at 9 o'clock on a Saturday morning. I could have cried. I almost did cry when about an hour later we had to go to 1 in, 1 out because we hit our fire number. But, you know, great.
Wow, congratulations. Brilliant.
Yeah.
And so why do you think it was such a success? Because you mentioned, you know, worried that it was snowing, but people still turned up. Is it because you've literally, reached such a passionate community that have got, you know, a common interest?
There's a lot of reason. So running is a big community. It's a lot bigger than people realize. Cool. They don't spend a lot, but it's high volume. I mean, and that's important. We took a very community-led approach to the event. So we worked with community groups. And we call it inside-out marketing, where we sort of really get inside a community and we leverage them and we make them feel like it belongs to them. So that really works. I was a bit of luck, sort of the right thing at the right time. Yeah, all fell into place. And I think passion, you just genuinely cannot fake passion. So if you love what you do, and we all do, then it comes through in the visitors and the exhibitors A, will support that, and B, will forgive you if you make a few mistakes, because they know that your motives are genuine.
Sure.
You know, we certainly didn't get it exactly right on the first show. In fact, the third one that we ran this January was probably the show that I'd always had in my head. But it's taken us a few iterations to get to that.
And I guess content also plays a big part in that as well. So making sure, because ultimately, correct me if I'm wrong, consumer shows are more of a day out, right? Than clearly, obviously, B2B.
Yeah, I think content is equally as important in B2B as B2C. And I think adding that star factor to a consumer show really enhances the day out. You know, if you get to meet your heroes, and we've, you know, part of the reason this has been cool is I've got to meet some of the coolest runners of all time, people that I think are awesome.
Yeah.
You have to try and play it cool when you meet them. You go, totally not bothered. Could you sign up? But
who's the one? Sorry, as a segue, who's the one runner or celebrity runner, if you like, that you were really starstruck with?
I think it's really hard to say because there's been so many good ones, and you couldn't pick one out.
Yeah.
But I guess for the first time because we had Kelly Holmes open the first show.
Yes, right.
So I think that was the most starstruck I've been because it was the first show. But then there's some other runners like Steve Cram, we've had Ewan Thomas, we've had Paula Ratcliffe. But then there's guys that if you're not a passionate runner, you wouldn't know, like Dean Karnazes, who's he's an incredibly famous ultra runner. And I read his book and it made me run my first ultra marathon. So meeting him was kind of like a real big sort of goal. Sure. Me.
So the show content is actually quite a broad church. So because as you say, when you say running, to me, who as you can see is probably not a passionate runner, I think you know, as you, the athletes you just mentioned, but as you say that it's more than just track, isn't it?
Very much so. And actually, I think that again is a perception that running has to deal with, because we have sort of a couple of key tenets. The first being, if you take one step out the door, we classify you as a runner, and our show should have anything for you, regardless of how far or fast that you run. So our favorite race distance inside the show is 5K.
Right.
So you look at our show, and there's this perception of runners being incredibly skinny people in lycra. And that's just not our audience at all. We're a real sort of community group, and there's a lot of people of all shapes and sizes that use running as a way of keeping fit, as a way of being part of a community, helping with mental health issues. Yeah. So it is a broad church.
You mentioned being part of the community, maybe dealing with certain issues. The pandemic, I know, you know, where I live in North London, has definitely inspired people maybe that hadn't gone for a run before, and also, you know, other activities like cycling, etc. If you can take any positive from the pandemic, obviously there's been lots of negatives. I guess that's been a boost for your community and also for the business and the shows, right?
Yeah, there's more people running and being active outdoors, and we are a health and well-being event.
Yeah.
There's more people doing that now than ever before, and people are realizing the importance of outside space and being active outside. So that's been fantastic. Yeah. I think it's had some really hard impacts on the community, particularly those people who use running as a way of managing mental health.
Yeah.
But it's also given us some sort of new ways of connecting with those guys and being innovative. I don't know if you saw our indoor relay that we did, but we basically we ran a Zoom meeting for a month, which where people would come and they would run an hour within the boundaries of their house on Zoom with a team captain. So we had like one of our guys doing it. So it was 24 hours a day for a month, and we raised about 45 grand for charity doing that.
Is that the Macmillan digital event, or was that additional one that you did?
This was completely separate. So we had five key charity partners who were all making a difference during lockdown. So there was a domestic violence charity, there was the NSPCC, there was children with cancer. So because there were a lot of unseen impacts, and Mine, for example, they were one of the charities as well. And then we had the NHS was the fifth one, NHS charities together. But there were a lot of unseen impacts from lockdown. So people not going and getting screenings that they might otherwise have got. So cancer patients were actually being caught much later than they normally would have been. And the mental health aspect, I think, has been talked about a lot. And at the time when we did it, you were only allowed out once a day for an hour to take exercise. And there were some people that just couldn't do that. If they were in an urban environment, they didn't perhaps feel safe to, or if they were using their hour to perhaps take their kids out or walk the dog, didn't mean that they were getting the exercise that they wanted. So the premise was, well, actually you can exercise within the confines of your house, no matter where you are.
Yeah.
And this was just kind of a fun way of doing it. We made it a charity fundraiser. I mean, we had people on treadmills, we had people running loops of their drive, their garden. We had one guy make an obstacle course inside his living room, which I was just like, my health and safety was just like, what? But it was, I mean, stuff like that is really innovative. And we tried a virtual event. So we did, we were supposed to have our London show in June. And on the same dates that we were due to run that, we called it the Digital Running Show.
Yeah.
And we got 2,500 people come and join us on that one. So we've been engaged with our community in sort of different ways. And actually, it's really helped us explore that sort of digital environment.
Yeah, so following on from that, and the fact that you've leveraged digital and I guess virtual during this period, do you see that as part of your shows going forward, and how you'll, whether on the day or beforehand, in terms of developing that community interaction?
Yes and no. So digital is huge for us because actually we have a 365 engagement with our community, particularly through social, like Instagram and Facebook is really important for us.
Yeah.
We're developing our YouTube presence. We see that as quite a significant opportunity, just because it's sort of a different way of engaging with that sort of community set. So those will become more and more important. And actually we've started leveraging our sort of data assets a bit more in terms of email newsletters. We developed something called the National Running Club, which was like our newsletter where we could do offers and incentives. Sure. So that was great. I think the digital event that we did, whilst it was scaled, it's probably not the future for us. I think the benefits derived from a physical event are just not able to be recreated for our audience in an online capacity. But so I think yes and no. Is that a fair answer?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think what you're saying is you can use the tools to continue to speak and communicate with the community, and possibly from a business perspective generate extra revenue streams, but ultimately there's nothing that can replace the face-to-face event.
Yeah, I mean, our guys are desperate to get back to an event. I know the whole industry is, but sure. It's particularly runners, because a lot of the races have been cancelled as well, and sure. So runners are really being, they're very motivated to get back to a physical event.
So Michael, thank you for that. You have just announced that the running show is going stateside. Talk to us about that, how that came about, why Boston?
Well, Boston's a big running city. Boston Marathon is obviously one of the biggest marathons in the world. Yep. It has a real sort of running culture. So it's quite an obvious first step for us. But why the States? I mean, obviously the market there is huge. I think everybody in events knows how big the big events are out in the States. And our formula is very easily replicable. We have a few sort of magic ingredients in terms of the way that we put the show together. But once you've got those, you can pretty much have a run show in every major city around the world if you know how to do it properly.
Sure.
So that's our plan, actually. We've got quite aggressive expansion plans, firstly in the States, but then in other countries. And there's never a better time to launch than in a crisis. And coronavirus is very dominant. It's affected all of our thinking, and we've all had to be quite reductive in our operational procedures over this period. But we are going to come through that. And when we come through that, actually, we would like to very much ride that upswing. And for us, there's two upswings. The first is everybody is now being more active than they were before lockdown. Yeah. Pretty much everybody I know. And events are going to be more and more in demand than they ever have been, because people are, as good as it is to talk to you over Zoom, I mean, it'd be much better to do this over a beer.
Absolutely. I don't drink.
I'll drink for you.
And I what I'm about to say, I don't know if it's correct, but I'm assuming, obviously, when you did your due diligence to take it to Boston and to the States, other competitive events, and why do you think, if there were, why do you think yours would be more successful or as successful.
I think without sort of giving away our secret sauce too much, no one else really does what we do the way we do it,
Right.
anywhere in the world. There are big marathons all over the world, and they have exhibitions.
Yeah.
And those exhibitions are, in my view, substandard. So we think we have a way of doing it different and better, and no one else does it like we do. So
Sure.
that's
And I guess, sorry, go on, continue.
Yeah, no, without giving away any more of the secrets, no, that's pretty much us.
Okay, I'll try to tease it out of you. And I guess you mentioned partners in the UK being important. You know, history would tell you that not just in the exhibitions business, many companies from the UK and Europe have tried to go into the States and not succeeded, possibly because they haven't brokered the right partnerships over there. Is that something that you're obviously going to, you know, work on and have been working on, clearly?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that the first reason we did this, so Doug Emsley, who's MD of Tarsus, obviously very experienced, very credible in the US market, and knows it very well. He's invested in us, and he's been very helpful in terms of contacts, connections, etc., which has enabled us to sort of move into the market with an educated view. And then in addition to that, we've just hired a guy called Jeff Grunhart, he used to work on the Running Event, which is a B2B trade show run out in the States. So we've kind of got that experienced head in terms of running exhibitions. Although ours are B2C, I mean, it is transferable.
Sure.
And then we've got obviously the experienced head in Doug, who can sort of give us that market insight that we need as well.
Yeah. I was going to come on and talk about that. Obviously, when people take on investments into a business, whether it's through private equity or an individual or even going public, invariably it can change the dynamic of the way that the business operates. What do you feel? How do you feel about that as someone that set the business up?
The first part, and I've been through this a few times. So I've got quite a good board now. You are the limiting. If you're an entrepreneur, you're the limiting factor of your business. And I was very conscious that I had to take a step from being a person-centric business into being a people-centric business, where we've got a strong board that can sort of question the decision making and add some sort of critical thinking to the way that you develop things. And so that's really important. And we were doing that already in the UK, but in the States or wherever the first sort of geo-adaptation of the event was going to be, it was really important. It was somebody who understood us, understood our ethos, our methodology, and also got the market. And Doug he's a ledge. He's like a really nice guy. He's a runner. We knew each other before the investment talks.
Right. Okay.
So we'd sort of felt each other out a little bit. And actually he's helped advance our thinking. He's advanced the pace, and he's been a hands-off wherever we've needed to be, and whenever we've needed advice, he's been really involved. So, sort of perfect partner, really.
Good. And in terms of the challenges of launching in the States, what do you think the main challenges are going to be?
I think the challenge is actually thinking big enough. The opportunity for us in the States is massive. It's not just this one event, and we've got quite a few others scheduled. And again, that's always been my challenge, because I set it up in a shed at the end of my garden. It was almost like it didn't feel real for the first year. And I'm continually having to sort of remind myself to think like I would if I was playing with somebody else's money, if I was in a corporate, where you can be a bit bolder. But yeah, so I think sometimes that is probably the challenge. I don't see any challenges in terms of the event concept, because the feedback we've had has just been off the chain. There's some local issues around sort of anytime you go into a local market, you've obviously got sort of unique ways of doing things. Again, we've hired a local operations consultant who's sort of running all of that side of the business for us, but actually being managed by our operations team from here, so that the brand continuity stays the same. So yeah, really is just being bold enough. And I think in this market at this time, when a lot of people are obviously suffering, and there's some bad news continuously being dripped onto us, I think that's actually a sort of a situation for all of us. We all need to try and spot the opportunities and go for them, because it's going to take me, I mean, this US show won't run for another 15 months.
Yeah.
So by then we're going to be in a very different environment to the environment that we're in now.
That's true. You mentioned other expansion plans. Are you able to sort of enlighten us on those at this stage?
Yes and no. Yeah, I mean, we would like to see as many of our brands go international as possible, and
Sure.
we've got good stable of brands now.
Talk to us. Sorry to interrupt me. Talk to me. It'd be great if you can give our viewers an intro to, because you're launching a couple of other shows, right? The snow show and the outdoor.
We've got the National Running Show, which we've got two of in the UK, and we could have lots of those internationally, including in-country. We've got the National Outdoor Expo, which that trades for the first time in March. And we've got the National Snow Show, which will trade for the first time next October.
Right.
So they all run off our inside-out marketing strategy. They're all very retail-led B2C events. And yeah, we would like to take those into as many countries internationally as possible. Then we probably have at least 2 events on the Devo slate at the moment. Okay. We're very aggressive in terms of expansion plans.
Good for you. And the snow shows seems, I mean, can you give us a flavour of how that is going to be brought to life?
Yeah, I think there's obviously been a ski and snowboard show for quite some time, which unfortunately closed recently. And I think there was a move to make the festivalization movement around B2C shows in terms of trying to bring the experience inside the show. And actually, in my opinion, that show moved too far towards being an experience and too far away from delivering the retail opportunity. Yeah. And consumers need to buy stuff to enable them to go and partake in their hobbies. And the high street is pressured, specialist shops are harder and harder to find, and exhibitions are perfectly placed to fill that gap. We want to operate within that space. Because we've got a good track record of doing it, we are very quickly sort of taking over those available segments.
Okay. Is there anything else you want to cover on America that I might have missed off?
No, I think it's just a big opportunity. I mean, it's very early days for us there. We've got a significant long-term plan. But yeah, we're really excited about it. Watch this space.
I have to talk to you about the sort of government response to the pandemic and how it's affected the industry. Can you give us your views on maybe why the government has not recognised, I guess, consumer and trade fairs as a viable option to open?
I can't. I think
that's the end of that.
It's really, I find it really difficult and bemusing to see why government hasn't engaged with exhibition organisers the way that international operators have. I mean, you look, every other country in Europe seems to have a go date and a strategy around live events. We don't, and I think that's a mistake, particularly as we are a market leader. £70 billion of economic impact, I know we keep talking about, but actually if you look at most of the major international events and the biggest international event organisers, most of them are domiciled here. Sure. And it just seems crazy that we are the last to the party. However, I would say, I think before the pandemic, we had quite an issue in that government didn't understand us, didn't understand what we did, and we'd gotten a bit lazy. We didn't spend any time or effort on lobbying, making our voices heard. And I think actually through the pandemic, particularly the AAO and different organisations like MASH have really sort of pushed the agenda around events, and government definitely know what we do. Boris even said he even quoted a number. He might have got the wrong number, but he talked about it.
He inflated the number, which was a benefit.
Yeah, I mean, that's great. But actually, he's aware of us, and he knows that we operate and we make a difference. I think there is stuff happening. I know there is stuff happening that could make a real difference and could actually enable us to operate back a lot quicker and sooner than we can see. And I think if that comes good, then actually we might have a very different situation. But at the moment, the response is quite frankly bemusing.
Yeah. Just one other thing I wanted to mention. So, given the pandemic and people's habits now obviously changing, wearing masks, maybe being a bit fearful of going out, do you think it's going to be harder to mobilise a community in general and your community for your shows because of that going forward? Do you think they might be more fearful of going to an indoor event?
Yeah, I was really worried about that, to be honest.
Yeah.
I mean, ticket sales would say no. I mean, we did 20,000 ticket sales in the lockdown period. I mean, the indoor lockdown period.
Yeah.
So, I mean, our audience is physically fit. They tend to skew to a slightly younger demographic.
Yeah.
So
fair enough. Yeah.
There's less. They're probably less worried about the risk. But I think if we're trying to bring back socially distanced shows, I think that is going to be hard. I think it is going to bring back a sort of a stranger environment. It's not going to be the same show. If we are able to deliver mass testing on entry into an event and create a COVID safe environment inside an exhibition hall, then actually that becomes something that I think will really work. And for me, that is the answer to bring live events back. And it's happening. I mean, Singapore is testing it today. So we are not a long way away from that.
Perfect. Okay, so Michael Seaman, CEO and founder of Raccoon Events, we wish you the very best of luck stateside and with your expansion plans generally and for the shows next year. Thank you for joining us today.
Thanks, mate. Thanks for having me.